Ah, yes, the noble dream of going to bed early. A quiet evening, a warm cup of chamomile, and me declaring, "Tonight, I'll be responsible." Well, friends, that plan lasted precisely 4 minutes, right up until I opened the wardrobe and discovered a sock civilization thriving behind Linda's winter coats. One thing led to another, as it does when you're both sleepy and mildly curious, and suddenly I was deep into a 2 a.m. archaeological dig involving scarves, expired mothballs, and an emotional reunion with a missing slipper. So, fluff your pillow, settle in, and join me for the night I tried to sleep early, and accidentally redecorated half the bedroom. It started, as all questionable decisions do, with a burst of optimism and a mug of lukewarm tea. I remember standing in the kitchen at exactly 8:47 p.m., which, for a man of my nocturnal habits, is basically dawn. The plan was simple. I'd go to bed early. Not just before midnight early, I mean proper early. The kind of early that makes you feel smug the next morning while you sip your coffee and look down pityingly on the yawning mortals who stayed up scrolling through videos of raccoons stealing cat food. Now, I should clarify something. I am not a night owl by choice. I'm more of a night wanderer. I start doing something innocent, like brushing my teeth, and somehow end up reorganizing the junk drawer or Googling, "Do penguins have knees?" So tonight, I was determined. A new Henry, disciplined, mature, and fully aware that my body is 75% coffee and denial. "Linda," I announced as I strutted into the living room, "tonight I'm sleeping early." Linda didn't even look up from her crossword. She just said, "Uh-huh. That's what you said when you tried intermittent fasting and accidentally ate 4 muffins at 11 p.m. "Those muffins were medicinal," I said, "for morale." "Of course," she said, still scribbling. "So what's the plan this time? Are you putting yourself to bed like a toddler again?" "That was one time," I protested, "and technically Daisy tucked me in. She's very nurturing." Daisy, our dog, looked up from the couch at the sound of her name. She gave me the same expression Linda does when I say, "I'll fix that thing tomorrow." Affectionate disbelief. I ignored the mockery and filled my mug with water for my tea. Chamomile. The sleepy time variety, with that little bear in pajamas on the box. I was already halfway to enlightenment. At 9:03 p.m., I dimmed the lights. I even turned off the TV before the episode ended, which I'm told is how disciplined people live. I brushed my teeth, set my phone on the charger across the room, a heroic act of self-control, and announced once again, for the record, "I am going to bed now." From the living room, Linda called out, "Should I alert the media?" "Maybe," I said. "This is historic." I entered the bedroom like a monk entering a temple. Everything looked peaceful. The bed was freshly made, the sheets smelled faintly of lavender detergent, and Daisy was curled at the foot of it like a furry guardian angel. I took one deep, triumphant breath. Early bedtime, here I come. That's when I noticed it. The wardrobe door was slightly open, just a crack, barely an inch, but enough to catch my attention. I could see the sliver of shadow inside. Normally, I'd ignore it. But when you've spent a lifetime convincing yourself that creaks and cracks are part of a house's personality, that tiny gap starts whispering to your curiosity like a siren. I told myself, "Henry, it's fine. You're going to sleep. The wardrobe is just breathing." But then Daisy looked up at the door and tilted her head. Twice. Now, a tilting dog head is basically an omen in this house. Last time she did that, we discovered the leftover lasagna had turned into a science project. So naturally, I had to check. I got up, muttering, "It'll take 2 seconds." and opened the door. That's when the avalanche began. Scarves, belts, a rogue hanger, and something that might have once been a festive sweater fell out in a heap. I stood there, blinking. "Well," I whispered, "that's not restful." Linda's voice floated in from down the hall. "What are you breaking in there?" "Just the silence of the evening," I called back. I crouched down to gather the pile, but then I spotted it. The sock. The long-lost polka-dotted sock I'd given up on months ago. The one I'd accused the dryer of eating. "Linda," I yelled, "the prodigal sock has returned." There was a pause, then her calm voice, "Try not to throw a welcome party for it." Some of us are relaxing, but I couldn't help it. There's something weirdly emotional about finding a missing sock. It's like discovering a childhood friend who moved away and now speaks fluent Lint. I put it aside reverently and peered deeper into the wardrobe. Big mistake. Because the moment I saw the chaos inside, my brain whispered the most dangerous words known to mankind. Might as well tidy up while I'm here. No one has ever just tidied up a little. It's a trap. Within minutes, I had pulled everything out. Shirts, jackets, a box labeled winter stuff, maybe, and an alarming number of plastic bags that contained smaller plastic bags. Daisy sat nearby watching, head cocked, probably wondering if I'd finally lost it. "This is fine," I told her. "We're just creating a system." She sneezed, which I took as skepticism. I found things I didn't even remember owning. A neon green tie from a wedding in 2004, a hat shaped like a pineapple, and a collection of mysterious remote controls with no known devices. Each item had a story. Some of them, unfortunately, were mine. One box was full of old photos, me and Linda at the beach, my hair still clinging to youth. Daisy as a puppy chewing on my slipper with the ferocity of a shark, and one of me wearing the pineapple hat, which instantly explained why it had been exiled to the wardrobe. Around 10:15, Linda appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "I thought you were going to sleep early." "I was," I said, surrounded by piles of my own decisions. But then the wardrobe intervened. She stepped over a stack of scarves. "The wardrobe intervened?" "It's a metaphor," I said, "for entropy." "Uh-huh," she said. "Well, entropy can wait till morning. You look like you're auditioning for a reality show called Buried Alive, Sock Edition." "I'm almost done," I lied. "You always say that right before it gets worse," she said. And she was right, because as soon as she left the room, I found something heavy at the back of the wardrobe, a mysterious cardboard box labeled "Do Not Open." Now, you can't just not open that. That's like leaving a cookie jar with a sign that says, "Totally empty, don't bother." Inside was a collection of Linda's old keepsakes, costume jewelry, birthday cards, a few letters, and a framed photo of us from our first apartment. I smiled, feeling sentimental and slightly dusty. Then I sneezed, loudly, the kind of sneeze that makes the dog bark and the ceiling fan wobble. From the living room, Linda shouted, "Bless you." "Also, stop opening boxes," I sniffled. "I'm not opening boxes. I'm rediscovering history." Daisy wagged her tail, perhaps thinking this was now some kind of family activity. She grabbed one of my socks and sprinted out of the room, looking extremely pleased with herself. "Daisy," I called, tripping over a boot as I chased her down the hall. She darted into the kitchen, dropped the sock in her water bowl, and stared up at me as if to say, "You're welcome." I sighed. Well, that's clean now, I guess. When I returned to the bedroom, it looked like a fashion tornado had hit. The bed was buried under clothes. My chamomile tea had gone cold, and the clock read 11:02 p.m. So much for sleeping early. But here's the thing about chaos. Once it begins, it takes on a life of its own. I couldn't stop now. I'd started imagining categories. Formal wear. Casual. Why did I buy this? It was intoxicating. I found one of Linda's scarves that smelled faintly of her favorite perfume, which, of course, made me pause and smile like an overly sentimental movie husband. Then I sneezed again, ruining the mood. I stacked folded shirts in uneven piles and made mental promises to donate half of them someday. Daisy returned, this time carrying a slipper she'd apparently rescued from under the couch. She dropped it proudly onto my foot, her tail thumping the floor like a metronome. "Thank you, assistant curator," I said. Linda appeared once more, now holding her toothbrush. "Henry, it's 11:30. Come to bed." "I will," I said. "Just need to finish the system, I know," she said, rolling her eyes. "You and your systems." She brushed her teeth as she walked away, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like, "We're going to need a bigger closet." I chuckled, but the truth was she had a point. I had unleashed something uncontrollable. The wardrobe wasn't being rearranged, it was consuming me. By midnight, I had a color-coded section for shirts, approximately, a mountain of socks with no known partners, and a growing suspicion that the wardrobe might, in fact, be expanding when I wasn't looking. As I finally sat down on the edge of the bed, surrounded by piles, I realized two things. One, I was not going to bed early. Two, tomorrow, I'd have to explain to Linda why the winter stuff maybe box was now missing its lid and possibly its purpose. Daisy yawned beside me, curling up into a fluffy ball of contentment. I sighed and patted her head. "You're right, girl. Maybe tomorrow we'll actually rest." The wardrobe door, now wide open, seemed to mock me gently in the dim light. "Fine," I whispered to it. "You win." And that's when I saw it. Something glinting at the very bottom, under a pile of scarves, something I didn't remember putting there at all. There are few things more dangerous than a curious man at midnight with a flashlight. Especially when that man is me, a man who once spent 45 minutes trying to quietly fix a squeaky door and ended up discovering WD-40 can, in fact, remove hair from one's arm. So there I was, sitting cross-legged in front of the wardrobe like a kid opening a treasure chest. The mysterious glint I'd seen was buried under a silky avalanche of scarves that smelled faintly of lavender, winter, and mild regret. Daisy watched from the bed, chin resting on her paws, eyes half-lidded with that mix of boredom and pity dogs reserve for humans doing dumb things past their bedtime. I reached in slowly, dramatically, as if the wardrobe were some ancient tomb and I was an archaeologist who should have been asleep 3 hours ago. My fingers brushed something metallic. I pulled it out into the dim lamplight. It was a small, gold-colored locket, dusty, tarnished, and attached to a chain that had clearly tangled itself into something resembling modern art. "Linda?" I called softly. No answer. I checked the time. 12:27 a.m. Right. She was asleep. Unlike me, the household night raccoon. I squinted at the locket. It wasn't mine. It wasn't even Linda's usual style. Too delicate, too vintage. Maybe something from her grandmother? Naturally, I did the only logical thing. I tried to open it with my fingernail. Click. Inside was a tiny photograph of two people I didn't recognize. A smiling woman in a wide-brimmed hat and a man with the kind of mustache that suggested he gave stirring speeches about trains. The picture was faded, but you could still make out their joy. I frowned. "Who are you two?" Daisy gave a small woof, which I took to mean, "You're talking to jewelry again, aren't you?" I turned it over. On the back, engraved in looping script, were the words, "To M with all my heart, J." Ooh, mysterious, romantic, slightly nosy. At that moment, the hallway light flicked on. "Henry," Linda's voice carried the tone of someone who'd walked in on this kind of scene before. She stood in the doorway, hair messy, wearing her soft robe, and blinking at the explosion of fabric covering the floor. "Why?" she asked slowly. "Are you wearing your headlamp?" "It's not a headlamp," I said. "It's a flashlight with a strap, and also for focus." "You look like a spelunker in a clearance sale," she said. "What are you doing?" "I found this." I held up the locket like it was the Holy Grail. "Look, vintage mystery jewelry." Linda stepped closer, squinting at it. "Huh, that's not mine." "That's what worries me," I said. "Who's M? Who's J? Why was it hiding behind a pile of scarves? Have we inherited a cursed heirloom?" Linda blinked. "Or," she said dryly, "it's just something the previous owners left behind 15 years ago when we moved in." I deflated slightly. "Or that." Still, the romantic in me wasn't satisfied. The idea of a hidden story tugged at my curiosity like a toddler with a kazoo. "What if there's a whole secret love story attached to it?" I said. "Maybe Jay was a dashing sailor, and M waited here every night for his return." Linda raised an eyebrow. "And he stored his locket behind my winter scarves?" "Well," I said, "maybe he was dramatic and disorganized. Kindred spirit." Linda sighed and sat in the bed, careful not to crush Daisy, who immediately adjusted her position to reclaim the warmest spot. "All right," she said, "show me." I handed her the locket. She studied it thoughtfully. "Pretty, definitely old. We could ask Mrs. Halloway down the street. She's into antiques." "Mrs. Halloway?" I said. "The one with 47 garden gnomes?" 49 now," said Linda. "She got 2 more last week. I heard her bragging to the mailman." Of course she did. Linda set the locket on the nightstand and yawned. "You, my dear, need sleep. And tomorrow maybe we'll investigate your little mystery." I nodded, but as soon as she lay down, my brain whispered, "But what if it's haunted?" I stared at the wardrobe. It looked smug again, as if it knew something I didn't. "Don't give me that look," I muttered. "You started this." I climbed into bed, turned off the lamp, and tried to sleep. Tried being the key word. Because once the mind gets going, especially at 1 a.m., it becomes a carnival of unnecessary thoughts. What if J and M had a tragic story? What if there's treasure buried under the floorboards? What if the wardrobe is actually a portal to an alternate dimension full of polite ghosts who alphabetize their socks? At some point, I drifted into that half-sleep where dreams feel like half-baked ideas. In mine, I was a detective in a trench coat, interrogating Daisy under a flickering streetlight about the missing locket. She refused to talk without biscuits. When I woke up, it was 7:14 a.m., and Linda was already sipping coffee beside the window. "Morning," she said. "Did you finally sleep?" "I dreamt Daisy was part of an international jewel smuggling ring," I mumbled. "Ah," she said, "so the usual." She handed me a cup of coffee. "You'll need this. Mrs. Halloway is out front watering her hydrangeas. You might as well go ask her about your mystery locket." I squinted toward the window. Sure enough, there she was, dressed in a sun hat, floral gloves, and a bright purple tracksuit that could be seen from space. Her hydrangeas looked terrified. "I can't just walk out there," I said. "I need a plan. I need subtlety." "Or you could just talk to her like a normal person," Linda said. I took a sip of coffee, winced, too hot, and nodded. "Right, normal person, I can do that." 5 minutes later, I was standing outside, in my slippers, clutching the locket, and realizing I'd forgotten to brush my hair. Daisy trotted beside me, tail wagging, clearly thrilled about this spontaneous adventure. "Morning, Mrs. Halloway," I called, trying to sound casual. She looked up, her watering can paused mid-air. "Henry, you look early." "Yes, I woke up before noon," I said proudly. "Feels weird. Like I've joined society." She chuckled. "What brings you out at this hour?" I held up the locket. "Actually, I found something in our wardrobe. Thought it might be old. You're sort of the neighborhood historian/gnome curator." Her eyes sparkled. "Let me see." I handed it over, and she examined it like a jeweler on a crime show. Lovely craftsmanship, probably from the 1940s. See this hinge? Handmade. The engraving looks like it was done with real care." "So, maybe valuable?" I asked hopefully. "Oh, not in money," she said, "but in story, yes." I leaned in. "Story?" She smiled. "Might belong to the McAllisters. They lived in your house before you. Sweet couple. Mabel and James, I think. She loved collecting lockets. He worked for the railway." I blinked. M and J, Mabel and James. "Yep. Rumor is when they moved out, they left a few boxes behind. Maybe this was one." She handed it back gently. "You know, they were married over 50 years. Never spent a night apart until the day he passed. She said she could still hear him whistle through the halls." I swallowed. "Whistle?" "Yes," said Mrs. Halloway cheerfully, "right before bedtime, every night." Well, that was both heartwarming and mildly eerie. I thanked her and shuffled back home, Daisy prancing proudly with a stick she'd found, her version of emotional support. Inside, Linda was making toast. "Well?" she asked. "Turns out it belonged to the McAllisters," I said. "Mabel and James. He worked for the railway. She collected lockets. Apparently they were very in love." "That's sweet," Linda said. "So no ghosts then?" "Probably not," I said, although apparently he used to whistle before bed. Linda gave me a look. "You're not going to start whistling before bed, are you?" "Only if it helps with sleep hygiene," I said innocently. She rolled her eyes. "Please don't make sleep hygiene sound like a spa treatment." But that night, as I climbed into bed, I couldn't help but glance at the locket on the nightstand. There was something oddly comforting about it now. I imagined the McAllisters sharing this same room decades ago. Maybe James whistled while hanging up his jacket. Maybe Mabel teased him about always leaving socks around. A timeless marital tradition. I smiled at the thought. "Good night, Mabel and James," I murmured softly. Linda, half asleep, mumbled, "Tell your ghost friends to keep it down." Daisy yawned in agreement, and, for the first time in ages, I actually felt calm, cozy, ready to sleep. Naturally, that's when the mailman rang the doorbell. At 10:04 p.m. Now, I don't know what kind of person sends mail at 10:04 p.m., but whoever they are, they owe me 3 lost heartbeats and 1 cold cup of chamomile tea. The doorbell's sharp ding-dong sliced through the cozy silence like a fork through cheesecake. Daisy shot off the bed, barking with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just been personally invited to chaos. Linda sat up instantly, hair wild, eyes wide, the kind of half-asleep panic reserved for earthquakes and missing leftovers. "Who is ringing our doorbell at this hour?" she hissed. "Maybe it's a lost Amazon driver," I whispered, "or an enthusiastic raccoon who's learned manners." "Don't joke," she said, pulling the covers up. "You answer it." Of course, me, the designated negotiator for all things suspicious. I shuffled into my slippers, grabbed my robe, and tiptoed toward the door with Daisy trotting beside me like an over-caffeinated security guard. Her tail wagged furiously, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. The second ring came. Ding-dong. This time slightly longer, as if the person was getting impatient. "Coming," I whispered, because apparently I didn't want to wake the intruder. I peeked through the peephole. It was indeed the mailman, our mailman actually, Hank, a good-natured fellow with a fondness for Hawaiian shirts and conspiracy theories about pigeons. But tonight, Hank looked frazzled. His shirt was wrinkled, his cap askew, and he was holding a single envelope like it might explode. I opened the door a crack. "Hank, it's 10 o'clock at night. Did the postal service go nocturnal?" He jumped slightly. "Henry, oh good, you're up." "Barely," I said. "What's going on?" He held out the envelope. "This got mixed into the wrong bin earlier. It's marked urgent delivery." I couldn't sleep knowing I'd misplaced it. Linda's voice floated down the hall. "Tell him to come back tomorrow," I smiled weakly. "See, Hank, the household consensus is can't," he said quickly. "Regulations. It's marked hand deliver." "All right," I sighed. "Let's see it." He passed me the envelope like it was top secret. It was old-fashioned, yellowed at the edges, and addressed in looping handwriting. "To the current residents of 42 Maple Street." My address. That's us. No return sender, no postmark, nothing. Just that neat handwriting and a faint scent of... was that lavender? Linda had now appeared behind me, arms crossed, looking suspicious and regal in a robe. "Is this how horror movies start?" she asked. "Usually," I said. "But this one's too cozy for ghosts." Hank nodded solemnly. "I found it at the bottom of my bag. Don't know how long it's been there." "Could be from the McAllisters," I muttered, glancing at Linda. "Who?" said Hank. "The people who lived here before us," she explained. "Henry found a locket last night and now thinks he's on an archaeological dig." "It's historical preservation," I corrected. Hank leaned in. "You know, the McAllisters were legends at the post office, always sent handwritten cards, real stationary people. Mabel's handwriting looked just like that." Linda blinked. "Wait, Mabel McAllister, the same one from the locket?" "Could be," said Hank. "She used to send me cookies every Christmas. Best oatmeal raisin you ever tasted." I looked at the envelope again, my curiosity officially wide awake. "Well, we can't just not open it," Linda sighed. "Oh, here we go again." We gathered in the kitchen, Daisy hopping between us like an intern desperate to contribute. I laid the envelope on the counter. The paper felt soft, worn, almost delicate. Linda fetched her reading glasses. Hank adjusted his cap. Daisy sniffed the corner approvingly. "All right," I said, "moment of truth." I carefully tore it open and unfolded the single sheet inside. The handwriting matched the front, elegant, slightly shaky, but full of personality. It read, "To whoever calls this house home. If you are reading this, then I've long since moved on to quieter days. My husband James and I spent 50 beautiful years under this roof. We laughed, we danced, we argued about curtains, and we loved every inch of this old place. Should you find one of my little treasures, a locket perhaps, know that it was not lost but left behind on purpose. It carries a wish, that whoever finds it will always feel a little extra warmth here, even on the coldest nights. Homes remember love, after all. Be kind to each other and to the wardrobe. It's older than it looks. With affection, Mabel McAllister." The room fell quiet. Even Daisy stopped wagging for a moment, sensing the shift in mood. "Well," Linda said softly, "that's unexpectedly sweet." Hank sniffed. She really was the best. I blinked rapidly, pretending there was dust in my eye. She mentioned the wardrobe, I said, trying to sound practical instead of sentimental. It's like she knew I'd find the locket. Or, Linda said, you're just incredibly predictable about cleaning things at 11 p.m. I prefer to think it's destiny. Hank clapped me on the shoulder. Looks like you got yourself a blessed house, my friend. Or a haunted one, I muttered. Either way, he said, you've got good company. Linda offered him a cookie, because of course she'd baked earlier, and after a brief chat about the Postal Service's mysterious sorting system, it's basically a board game with envelopes, Hank said, he finally waved goodnight and trudged off down the street. When I closed the door, the house felt different somehow, warmer, like the air itself had just told us a bedtime story. Linda touched the envelope gently. You know, I kind of love her, Mabel, leaving messages for future residents. It's very you. Me? I said. I'd leave behind half-finished coffee mugs and instructions on how to reset the Wi-Fi. Exactly, she said. Same energy. I chuckled, setting the letter beside the locket on the counter. Well, at least now we know the wardrobe isn't cursed. Not cursed, she said, yawning. Just sentimental. We started cleaning up. Hank's cookie crumbs, Daisy's paw prints, the emotional residue of discovering we lived in the Hallmark Channel's coziest ghost story. By the time we made it back to bed, it was nearly midnight. Still counts as early if we squint, I said. Linda gave a sleepy laugh. You do realize this all started because you wanted to go to bed early, right? I do, I said proudly. And look how productive insomnia can be. Henry, she mumbled, curling under the blanket, if you find any more heirlooms, please do it in daylight. Deal. Daisy jumped up beside us, curling against my leg like a warm little comma. I turned off the lamp, but just before I did, I glanced at the wardrobe again. It stood quietly, dignified, its door closed for once. I could almost imagine Mabel smiling somewhere, pleased that her home was still full of life and laughter, and the occasional dog hair. The clock ticked softly. The house settled. And for a moment, I thought I heard it, a faint, contented whistle from somewhere deep in the walls. James? I whispered into the dark. Linda groaned. Henry, if you start talking to ghosts, I'm moving into the guest room. Right, I said quickly. Sleep. Just sleep. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was humming along with us, like an old friend sharing a lullaby. The next morning, I woke to the sound of chaos, which, in our home, means Daisy found something again. She was pawing at the bottom of the wardrobe, tail wagging frantically. Oh no, I muttered. Not another secret compartment. Linda appeared behind me, coffee in hand, looking equal parts amused and exasperated. You know, I was just thinking how peaceful this morning was. Daisy barked once, then sat as if to say, you may proceed with the discovery. I crouched down and found a tiny drawer I'd somehow missed before. Inside was a small folded note. I unfolded it carefully. It said, in neat handwriting, if you find this, please dust occasionally. Sincerely, Mabel. I burst out laughing. Linda, even her ghost believes in cleanliness. Linda grinned. You two would have been best friends. Except she'd actually get her cleaning done at reasonable hours, I said. True, she said, patting my shoulder. Come on, Mr. Archaeologist. Breakfast time. As we left the room, I gave the wardrobe a fond little salute. All right, Mabel. Message. Received. Daisy barked once in agreement, and somewhere in the distance I swear I heard that faint cheerful whistle again. I woke up the next morning feeling like Indiana Jones. If Indiana Jones had lower back pain and a golden retriever who refused to share the bed. The previous night's events were still swirling in my head. The locket, the heartfelt letter, the faint whistling that may or may not have been the radiator auditioning for a ghost movie. The whole thing had left me oddly energized, as if I'd been handed a personal mission from Mabel herself. Linda, on the other hand, was sipping her coffee at the kitchen table and watching me with the weary amusement of someone married to a man who owns more curiosity than common sense. "You've got that look," she said. "What look?" "The look you get right before you turn a small discovery into a community event." "That's unfair," I said. "I've never done that." She raised an eyebrow. "Henry, last summer you found a weird-shaped carrot and started the first annual neighborhood vegetable fair." "In my defense," I said, pouring coffee, "it was shaped like Elvis." "Exactly," she said. And then we had to explain to the mailman why our yard had a carrot with sideburns wearing sunglasses made out of tinfoil. "Details," I said, waving it off. "This is different. This is history. Mabel's history." Linda sighed. "Oh no, you're starting the McAllister Museum, aren't you?" "Not a museum," I said. "A modest archival initiative, maybe a walking tour." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "Just promise me this won't involve power tools." I hesitated. "Define power tools." "Henry." "Fine," I said, defeated. "No power tools." But my brain was already buzzing. What if the McAllisters had left other notes? Maybe there were more messages hidden around the property, a secret time capsule, or a tin of old letters buried in the garden. By the time Linda left for her morning yoga class, I'd already armed myself with a notebook, a flashlight, and Daisy, who, despite having no historical training, was enthusiastic about snacks and digging. I started inside, checking the baseboards, the corners, under the wardrobe, just in case Mabel had more cleaning instructions tucked away. Nothing. Then I looked out the window and saw the backyard glistening in the early sun, the hydrangeas, the old oak tree, the bird bath, all perfectly innocent. Suspiciously innocent. "Mabel," I muttered, "you wouldn't just stop at one note, would you?" Daisy barked as if to say, "Absolutely not." So out we went. It was a perfect morning. Warm, breezy, birds singing, and me kneeling in my pajamas next to a patch of grass, tapping the soil like a man trying to summon buried wisdom. "All right, Daisy," I said. "We dig here." Daisy, thrilled beyond measure, immediately started pawing furiously, sending clumps of dirt flying. I joined in with a small trowel, my archaeology tool, which was really just the thing I used for planting tomatoes. 15 minutes later, I had a small hole and a big mess. Nothing but roots, worms, and one very pleased dog. That's when I heard a familiar voice from over the fence. "Well, well, Henry. Early morning dirt therapy again?" It was Gary, my neighbor, wearer of loud Hawaiian shirts and proud owner of a laugh that could register on the Richter scale. "Morning, Gary," I said. "Just doing a bit of light excavating." He peered over the fence, sipping a smoothie the color of radioactive seaweed. "That's not what your wife said last time you used the word excavating." "This is different," I said. "I'm searching for historical artifacts, maybe a time capsule." Gary squinted. "Like dinosaur bones?" "No," I said. "More like heartfelt letters and keepsakes." He grinned. "So, emotional fossils." "Exactly," I said, realizing too late he was joking. Before I could stop him, he climbed over the fence. "You know, I took a geology elective in college." Gary, I said, that was 30 years ago. Once a scientist, always a scientist, he said proudly. Within minutes, Gary was in full volunteer mode, marking potential dig sites with my garden stakes and dramatically announcing, "We'll call this Sector B," every time Daisy found a new worm. At 10 a.m., the mailman, yes, Hank again, showed up to deliver a small package. He took one look at the scene, me on my knees, Gary holding a clipboard he'd brought from who knows where, and Daisy covered in dirt, and said, "Should I come back after the archaeological era?" No, I said. Perfect timing. Want to join the dig? Can't, he said, but I can offer moral support. He leaned on the fence. You do know that if you hit a utility line, the city will fine you, right? I froze. Hypothetically. Very unhypothetically, said Hank. Gary shrugged. Relax, I know what I'm doing. That was not comforting. 10 minutes later, Linda returned from yoga. She took one look at the backyard and stopped mid-step. Henry, she said slowly, why is there a small crater near the oak tree? Historical research, I said quickly. Uh-huh, she said. And why is Gary wearing my gardening gloves? Team spirit, Gary said cheerfully. Linda closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and muttered something that sounded like, "Should have married someone less curious." Look, honey, I said, holding up a muddy object. We found something. It was a rock, a very round, very ordinary rock. Gary squinted. Might be an old marble. Linda sighed. It's a rock. Daisy barked triumphantly and dropped another rock at my feet, as if proving the theory of abundance. See, I said, we're on to something. Linda pinched the bridge of her nose. You're on to needing a shower. But just as she turned to go back inside, something caught my eye, a glint of metal near the bird bath. Wait, I said dramatically. Over there. I rushed over, crouched, and brushed away the dirt. It was a small tin box, rusted but intact. My heart thumped. Oh, Mabel, you clever genius, Gary gasped. He found treasure. Linda froze mid-step. If that's a sprinkler head, I swear. It's not, I said, prying it open carefully. Inside, wrapped in a faded handkerchief, was a stack of small index cards. The top one read, McAllister Family Recipes. I blinked. Recipes, Linda tilted her head. Let me see. We carefully unfolded them on the patio table. There were handwritten instructions for all kinds of things. Mabel's oatmeal raisin cookies, James's Sunday stew, and something ominously titled Experimental Pickles. Do not attempt without supervision. Linda's eyes softened. Oh, that's lovely. A little piece of their life right here. Gary grinned. You know what this means, right? What? I asked. Neighborhood cook-off, Linda groaned. Gary. But it was too late. He was already dialing his wife on speakerphone. Honey, get the grill ready. Henry's found historical snacks. By noon, the backyard had transformed into what can only be described as an impromptu archaeological barbecue. Gary brought his portable grill. Hank returned with a bag of hot dog buns. Mrs. Halloway showed up carrying 2 of her gnomes for moral support. Even the mail truck idled outside while Hank took his lunch break. Linda gave me that look again, the one that says, I love you, but I'm considering relocating. I grinned. It's not a bad turnout for a dig site. She sighed but smiled anyway. At least everyone's fed. I flipped through the cards, finding one for Mabel's lemon cake. You know, I said, we could bake this in her honor. Call it the McAllister Memorial Cake. Sounds like a dessert that requires tissues, said Gary, already grilling something suspiciously green. Linda laughed. Or just a lot of frosting. By the time the sun began to set, our yard was full of laughter, stories, and a light haze of barbecue smoke. Kids from down the street were running around with plastic shovels, pretending to be junior archaeologists. Daisy was in heaven, half mascot, half crumb vacuum. I looked around and couldn't help but feel that Mabel would have loved this, her house alive again, full of neighbors and noise and warmth. Linda nudged me gently. "Well, Professor Diggs," she said, "satisfied?" "Completely," I said. "Though technically we still haven't excavated the east section of the yard," she groaned. "No, the east section is closed indefinitely." "But what if Mabel left dessert recipes there?" She pointed her spatula at me. "If you so much as pick up a shovel. Before breakfast, I'll turn this whole backyard into a rock garden." I raised my hands in surrender. Noted. As the stars began to twinkle and the last of the burgers disappeared, Gary lifted his smoothie cup for a toast. "To Henry and his bedtime adventures. May they never actually result in sleep." Everyone laughed, and I had to admit he was right. My early bedtime experiment had spiraled wildly out of control. But somehow, it had turned into something magical. A night and day full of discovery, neighbors, laughter, and the spirit of the couple who'd started it all. Daisy curled at my feet, tail thumping lazily. I raised my coffee mug in return. "To Mabel and James," I said. "May their house always stay a little bit alive," Linda smiled. "And may you never own a shovel again." We all laughed, the kind of laugh that lingers like warm light in the evening air. And for once, I didn't mind being awake past bedtime. You know that saying, one thing leads to another? Well, around here, it's more like one innocent idea leads to a neighborhood-wide media event involving snacks, small dogs, and someone wearing a Hawaiian shirt. After the backyard barbecue archaeology celebration, which, for the record, was supposed to be a quiet exploration of McAllister history, the story spread faster than free Wi-Fi. It started with Gary. Of course it did. Apparently, our dear neighbor had taken approximately 50 photos during the dig. Some of me holding a shovel like a confused pirate, some of Daisy mid-dig looking like a canine superhero, and one very unfortunate angle of me bending over near the bird bath that I still believe was sabotage. The next morning, he posted them on the neighborhood social media group with the caption, "Historical discovery in our backyard. Local man unearths recipes and legacy from Maple Street's past, featuring Daisy, the digging dog detective." I didn't even know we had a neighborhood social media group until Linda showed me, sipping her coffee with that particular expression of married amusement that means, "I told you so." "Henry," she said, sliding the phone across the table, "you're trending locally." I blinked. "Is that good?" "Well," she said, "it depends how you feel about being known as the guy who discovered oatmeal raisin recipes at midnight." "History has to start somewhere," I said defensively. Daisy, lounging by the window, wagged her tail as if to say, "I've been waiting for my moment." The comments poured in. Mrs. Halloway wrote, "I always knew that wardrobe had stories to tell." Gary's wife commented, "Proud of the Maple Street crew," and someone named CorgiFan87 simply posted, "More photos of the dog." Within a few hours, the local newspaper had reached out. The Maple Gazette. Circulation. Roughly everyone in town who still enjoys crossword puzzles and police blotters. Linda read the message aloud. "We'd love to do a feature on your discovery and Daisy's heroism. Could we come by this afternoon?" "Heroism?" I said. "She mostly dug holes and ate half a hot dog." Linda smirked. "In this house, that's pretty heroic." So we cleaned the living room, or rather, Linda cleaned while I strategically relocated clutter. Daisy got a bath, which she accepted with the dignified despair of a creature betrayed by the people she feeds crumbs to. By 2 p.m., the reporter arrived. Her name was Megan, young, bright-eyed, and wielding a notepad like it was Excalibur. She had that journalistic enthusiasm that made me both nervous and oddly proud. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," she said, shaking our hands, "thank you for having me. I've heard such charming things about your discovery." "Please," I said, "call me Henry, and this is Daisy, the true archaeologist." Daisy wagged, then sneezed dramatically, showering Megan's notebook in tiny droplets of dog enthusiasm. "Wonderful," said Megan, dabbing her notes. "She's got personality." Linda muttered, "That's one word for it." Megan perched on the couch and asked all the usual questions: how I'd found the locket, what inspired the digging, whether I'd planned to start a local history project. I told the whole story with my usual flair for unnecessary detail, including the part where I mistook the locket's shine for an alien artifact. Linda added, "He also tried to interview the wardrobe at one point." "It was glowing in the moonlight," I protested. Megan chuckled. "This is perfect, heartwarming, funny, nostalgic, and with a dog." She looked down at Daisy, who was now sitting proudly with her head tilted like a professional model. "She's photogenic, too." "Oh, she knows," said Linda. So there we were, me holding the locket like it was a priceless museum piece, Linda standing beside me with patient grace, and Daisy wearing a tiny bow tie that Gary's wife had donated for the occasion. Click, click, click. Megan snapped photos of us near the wardrobe, the backyard dig site, and, because Daisy refused to move, in front of the fridge. By the time she left, I was feeling rather pleased with myself. "Well," I said, dusting off my hands, "that went well." Linda grinned. "If you start signing autographs, I'm moving in with Mrs. Halloway." But the next morning, everything escalated. The Maple Gazette ran the story front page. There I was, holding the locket with the headline, "Local Couple Unearths Love, Legacy, and Lemon Cake, Thanks to Their Dog." And underneath that, a large photo of Daisy looking noble and windswept, captioned, "Daisy Parker, Hero Pup Helps Preserve Maple Street History." Linda nearly spit out her coffee. "They quoted you saying, 'I just followed my curiosity and my dog's nose.' Henry, that makes you sound like a poetic raccoon." I took the paper reverently. "It's art." The phone started ringing. Friends, neighbors, even the local library wanted to display the recipes. Gary called to say he'd already printed the article and laminated it for posterity. By noon, the Maple Street group chat, which I still don't fully understand, had decided to throw a Maple Memories celebration at our house that weekend. "I didn't agree to this," I told Linda. "You never do," she said, buttering toast. And yet, here we are. That weekend, our backyard once again became a hub of cheerful chaos. Tables of food, folding chairs, and a large banner, courtesy of Gary, that read, "Welcome to the McAllister Memory Festival." Below that, in smaller letters, starring Daisy Parker, archaeology dog extraordinaire. Linda stared at it, deadpan. "He gave the dog top billing." "She earned it," I said. Daisy, wearing a floral bandana, wagged happily as children took turns interviewing her with a toy microphone. The crowd grew. Neighbors, relatives, even someone from the city museum who'd heard about the historical recipes. I gave a little speech about how Mabel and James McAllister had built a home full of love and laughter, and how their spirit still lingered in every creaky floorboard and slightly judgmental wardrobe. Then I unveiled what I called the McAllister exhibit. It was really just our dining table covered in sentimental artifacts, the locket, the handwritten recipes, and a framed copy of Mabel's letter. Linda had arranged it beautifully, but she refused to call it curation. "I'm not your museum intern," she'd said. "I'm your wife." Gary gave a toast with his smoothie, blue this time. To the Parkers for proving that history can be delicious. The crowd cheered, and Linda whispered to me, "If this turns into another cook-off, I'm faking a power outage." It did, of course, turn into a cook-off. The neighbors had brought their versions of Mabel's recipes. There were 5 different lemon cakes, each claiming to follow the authentic handwriting. Someone even made experimental pickles, which turned out to be both alarming and vaguely effervescent. Linda's cake, naturally, won by popular vote, though Daisy was caught attempting to judge from the sidelines with her tongue. Halfway through the event, a local TV crew showed up, because apparently the Gazette story had gone mildly viral online. The reporter, a man named Todd with perfect hair and a suspiciously shiny smile, stepped onto our lawn and said, "We're live at the home of Henry and Linda Parker, where a dog named Daisy has become an unlikely town hero." Linda leaned toward me and whispered, "Do not make puns on live TV," which, of course, meant I immediately did. When Todd asked, "How did this all start?" I replied, "Well, it began with a wardrobe malfunction." Todd blinked. Linda groaned audibly. The crowd erupted in laughter. Daisy barked twice as if adding comedic timing. By evening, our yard looked like the closing credits of a feel-good movie. Kids chasing bubbles, neighbors sharing leftovers, Gary setting off small and probably illegal sparklers, and Daisy proudly wearing a paper crown that said, "Historical Hero." Linda leaned against me, finally relaxing. "You know," she said, "this all started because you couldn't fall asleep." "See," I said, "procrastination can be productive." She smiled. "Don't get any ideas." But I already had one. "Next week," I said, "we could organize a neighborhood storytelling night. Everyone shares something about the old days. Recipes, letters, memories." Linda tilted her head. "That's actually not a bad idea." "Thank you," I said. "I'll start making flyers." "Wait," she started, but it was too late. The creative avalanche had begun again. That night, when everyone finally left, I sat on the porch with Daisy at my feet and Linda beside me, sipping tea. The air smelled like lemon cake and laughter. "You know, Henry," she said softly, "Mabel would have loved this." "I think she did," I said. "All day I kept feeling like the house was smiling." "Let's just hope it doesn't start talking," Linda said. We laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that only happens when you've made peace with the ridiculousness of life, and maybe even learned to enjoy it. Inside, the wardrobe stood still and dignified, holding its secrets. Daisy sighed contentedly, resting her head on my foot. I patted her gently. "Well, Daisy," I said, "you're officially famous. What are you going to do now?" She gave a small, sleepy snuffle, as if to say, "Take a nap, obviously." "Good plan," I whispered. "Maybe I'll finally get that early night." Linda smiled without opening her eyes. "Sure, Henry. Whatever you say." And once again, I didn't get to bed early, but somehow I didn't mind at all. I've learned 2 things in life. 1, I'll just do one small thing before bed is a lie. 2, once a neighborhood thinks you're a local historian, you will never live it down. A week after Daisy's triumphant rise to local stardom, our house was still buzzing, literally and metaphorically. We'd received thank you cards, lemon cake deliveries, and even a small plaque from the Maple Gazette that read, "To Henry, Linda, and Daisy for preserving love, laughter, and carbohydrates." Linda hung it in the hallway. "There," she said, "now you have an award for not going to bed." "Finally recognition for my insomnia," I replied. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no, my latest and, allegedly, last project was the Maple Street Memory Night. A cozy storytelling evening where everyone could share a bit of their past. Nothing fancy, just neighbors, tea, and the faint chance that someone would bring cookies. Linda had agreed on one condition. "This ends tonight. No more community archaeology, no wardrobe investigations, and definitely no midnight excavations. Scout's honor, I said. I was never a scout, but it sounded official. By 7 o'clock, our living room was full again. Gary brought folding chairs and an unreasonably large bowl of popcorn. Mrs. Halloway came with 2 of her gnomes for ambiance. Hank the mailman arrived in uniform because, as he said, history never clocks out. Even Daisy had a front row seat sitting primly on her blanket as if waiting for her next headline. Linda lit a few candles, poured tea, and gave me the look that said, "Don't overdo it." I stood, cleared my throat, and began. Friends, neighbors, and honorary gnomes, tonight we celebrate stories, because every house, every street, and apparently every wardrobe has one. A chuckle rippled through the crowd. We've laughed, we've baked, we've maybe overdug our yard a little. Gary called out, "It was for science." Exactly, I said, and thanks to Mabel and James McAllister, we've remembered that even the smallest keepsakes can connect us across time. Linda whispered, "You're one monologue away from running for mayor." "Don't tempt me," I whispered back. Then I opened the floor for stories. One by one, neighbors shared. Mrs. Halloway told how she and her late husband had once planted a tree that still bloomed every spring, no matter what nonsense the weather's doing. Hank recounted the time he accidentally delivered a wedding invitation to the wrong address, and the recipient showed up anyway, wearing plaid. Even Gary's wife admitted she'd once hidden her engagement ring in a flower pot for safety and forgot which one for a year. It was lovely, warm, funny, and just sentimental enough to make everyone smile softly into their tea. Finally, it was Linda's turn. She stood, brushing imaginary crumbs off her dress. "I'll keep it short," she said, "because someone has to make sure Henry doesn't start another hobby tonight." The room laughed. "But honestly," she continued, "I think this whole accidental adventure reminded us that home isn't just walls and stuff. It's the stories we pile up, like Henry piles up hobbies, messy, chaotic, but full of love." She smiled at me, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. The applause that followed was gentle but genuine, and even Daisy barked twice in approval. After the laughter and lemon cake, there's always lemon cake now, people began drifting home. The candles flickered low. Mrs. Halloway's gnomes looked oddly proud. As Gary and Hank carried chairs back outside, I stood for a moment, gazing around the quiet room. The wardrobe stood open just an inch, as if winking. "All right, Mabel," I murmured. "We did it." Linda came up beside me, slipping her arm through mine. "You know," she said softly, "you actually created something wonderful." "I had a good co-host," I said. "And a better dog," she replied. Daisy wagged from her blanket. We stood in silence for a bit, soaking in the cozy aftermath, the kind of hush that follows a night full of laughter and crumbs. Then Linda squeezed my arm. "Now, Mr. Historian, it's officially bedtime." I grinned. "You think I can actually sleep early this time?" "Doubtful," she said, "but maybe aim for before midnight." I turned off the lights and headed toward the bedroom, pausing once more by the wardrobe. "Good night, Mabel. Good night, James," I whispered. A soft creak echoed back. Linda called, "That better be you talking to furniture again." "It's fine," I said. "The wardrobe and I are on excellent terms now." Daisy followed me in, doing 3 dramatic circles before curling up on the rug. Linda was already under the covers, reading a book titled "Sleeping Better for Stubborn People." I climbed into bed beside her. "So," I said, "do you think the house feels happier?" She smiled without looking up. "I think the house feels like it needs a nap, just like me." "Fair." I switched off the lamp. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of the fridge, the gentle whir of the ceiling fan, and Daisy's snuffly dreams. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the urge to get up, rearrange anything, or start a new archaeological society. Just peace. Just sleep. And then, right before I drifted off, I heard it. A soft, familiar whistle. Not eerie, not frightening, just gentle, like someone humming an old tune through time, wishing us sweet dreams. Linda stirred slightly. Henry? Yeah? Please tell me that's the radiator. It probably is, I said. Probably. The morning sunlight spilled through the curtains. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Daisy's tail thumping against the floor like an enthusiastic drumline. Linda handed me a mug. You actually slept. I did, I said, stretching, deeply, peacefully, and without uncovering ancient artifacts. Miracles happen, she said. We sat on the porch, sipping coffee while the neighborhood woke up, kids biking past, Hank's mail truck rumbling down the road, Mrs. Halloway repositioning her gnomes with military precision. Gary waved from across the street. Hey, Professor Diggs, the newspaper says Daisy's up for a local Legends Award. I blinked. That's a thing. Apparently, Linda said. And you're her +1, Daisy barked proudly. Well, I said, smiling. Looks like our girl's got one more story in her. Linda leaned her head on my shoulder. Just promise me it won't involve any more wardrobes. I promise, I said. From now on, I'm a changed man. She looked at me. You're lying, aren't you? Entirely, I said cheerfully. She laughed, that soft, genuine laugh that makes every bit of chaos worth it. Daisy stretched, flopped down, and sighed contentedly. And in that moment, surrounded by coffee, sunlight, and the quiet hum of our not-so-quiet lives, I realized something simple. Sometimes, trying to sleep early leads you exactly where you're supposed to be. Not in bed necessarily, but right in the middle of life. Messy, funny, loud, and beautifully awake. That night, I did try again. Truly. I brushed my teeth, made my tea, and whispered to Linda, "Tonight's the night." She didn't even look up from her book. Sure, Henry. I climbed into bed, pulled up the blanket, and exhaled. The wardrobe was closed, the house was calm, and for once, even my brain seemed ready to cooperate. I closed my eyes. Then, Daisy sneezed. Linda laughed. And I decided maybe early sleep could wait just a little longer. After all, I had everything I needed right here. A cozy home, a patient wife, a famous dog, and the faintest echo of a whistle that somehow made the night feel like a lullaby. And that's the tale of the night I tried to sleep early and ended up rearranging the wardrobe. If it made you chuckle, smile, or feel just a bit cozier, give Daisy a virtual head pat and click subscribe for more bedtime giggles and heartwarming chaos from Henry, Linda, and the neighborhood crew. Sweet dreams, friends. May your wardrobe stay tidy and your nights stay full of laughter.